You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. On the night of June 25, 1950, a massive military force from North Korea, involving 10 divisions totaling 89,000 men, launched an unprecedented invasion into South Korea. This surprise attack overwhelmed the South Korean army, which was significantly smaller, poorly equipped, and unprepared for such a conflict. With a major numerical advantage, the North Korean army swiftly broke through South Korean defenses, capturing the capital city, Seoul, by June 28 and pushing what was left of South Korea's military forces further south. In response to this crisis, the United Nations Security Council decided to step in and help South Korea. Following this, President Harry S. Truman of the United States took action by sending American ground troops to assist. However, the U.S. military presence in the Far East had been declining since World War II ended 5 years prior, and the closest American force was the 24th Infantry Division stationed in Japan under Major General William F. Dean. This division was not only understaffed but was also equipped with outdated weaponry due to post-war reductions in military spending. Despite these shortcomings, the 24th Infantry Division was ordered to move into South Korea to join the fight. One part of the 24th Infantry Division was tasked with a crucial mission, to be flown into Korea using C-54 Skymaster transport planes. Their objective was to quickly block the North Korean forces in their tracks, giving time for the rest of the division to arrive by sea. The 21st Infantry Regiment was picked for the job, as it was seen as the most ready for combat among the division's 3 regiments. For this pivotal task, the 21st Infantry's 1st Battalion was chosen, led by Lieutenant Colonel Charles B. Smith, a seasoned commander with experience from the Battle of Guadalcanal in World War II. On July 5th, this unit, known as Task Force Smith, faced off against North Korean troops at the Battle of Osan. They managed to hold off over 5,000 enemy infantry for 7 hours before they were overwhelmed and had to retreat. Following Task Force Smith, the 24th Division's 34th Infantry Regiment was the second American unit to enter Korea. With 2,000 soldiers from the 1st and 3rd Battalions, they moved north from Busan by train. The 1st Battalion took positions at Pyeongtaek, a small village with wooden huts and muddy roads located just 10 miles south of Osan. Their mission was to block any further North Korean push. Meanwhile, the 3rd Battalion set up east at Anseong. These 2 battalions were strategically positioned along a bottleneck, flanked by mountains and the Yellow Sea, making their defense line crucial for holding back the enemy. Despite the strategic placement, the 1st Battalion faced significant challenges. They were underprepared, lacking the training, tanks, and anti-tank guns needed to effectively counter North Korean armor. The division as a whole was struggling with equipment shortages, affecting everything from artillery support to communication gear. Most radios didn't work, and there was a dire shortage of batteries, wires, and phones for communication, not to mention the absence of tanks and scarce supplies of ammunition that could penetrate North Korean T-34 tanks. The new commander of the battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Ayres, was misinformed about the enemy's capabilities, believing them to be poorly trained and equipped. With this mindset, his unit formed a defensive line north of Pyeongtaek, preparing for an advance that would vastly outmatch their expectations. The troops, equipped primarily with M1 Garand rifles and severely limited ammunition, were not fully prepared for the encounter that awaited them. With only minimal anti-tank weaponry, no grenades, and a lack of combat experience among many of the soldiers, some of whom had been rushed in from other divisions just the day before, the battalion faced a daunting challenge. On the evening of July 5th, a scouting team headed north and encountered tanks near the village of Sojong, south of Osan. Unfortunately, their attempt to take out one of the tanks failed, leading to the loss of Private Kenneth R. Shattuck and forcing the team to retreat back to Pyeongtaek. Not long after, survivors from Task Force Smith came by the 1st Battalion's headquarters, sharing tales of their defeat at Osan. Those stories, however, were met with skepticism by some, including Ayres, who doubted their accuracy. During a visit to the command post, Brigadier General George B. Barth from the 24th Infantry Division gave orders for the battalion to hold their ground, but to avoid getting flanked or surrounded, mindful of the recent loss at Osan. He then directed Colonel J. B. Lovelace of the 34th Infantry Regiment to pull back and regroup at Cheonan to the south, a move that involved withdrawing the 3rd Battalion without it having engaged in combat. Barth's strategy reflected his belief that the 34th Infantry couldn't defend Pyeongtaek as effectively as the 21st Infantry did at Osan. Part of this plan included ordering L Company to stay south of Pyeongtaek to cover the 1st Battalion's withdrawal, a command that ultimately wasn't executed as L Company headed for Cheonan. In the meantime, the North Korean 4th Infantry Division, bolstered by the 105th Armored Division, pressed on along the Osan-Pyeongtaek road. Led by Division Commander Lee Kwan-moo and comprising up to 12,000 soldiers along with a significant number of tanks, they continued their advance. Barth, who had been with Task Force Smith initially, had already instructed the 1st Battalion 34th Infantry to retreat in stages if they risked being encircled by the North Korean force, aiming to delay the enemy's progression as much as possible. This plan was in motion as more Task Force Smith survivors arrived at the battalion's location by midnight on July 5th. In the early hours of July 6th, the battalion executed a tactical delay by destroying a bridge 600 yards north of their position, an effort to slow down the North Korean advancement. On the morning of July 6th, amidst heavy rain and fog, visibility was severely limited. In these challenging conditions, American troops spotted 13 North Korean T-34 tanks halted at a bridge just after sunrise. Following the tanks were columns of infantry. Initially mistaking these forces for the remnants of Task Force Smith, the Americans soon realized they were facing a large, deploying enemy force. The battalion commander quickly ordered a mortar attack on the North Koreans, scattering them as their lead tank opened fire on A Company's position, located on a hill southwest of the road. Despite successfully taking out a truck with their mortar fire, a North Korean tank round incapacitated the American artillery observer, leading to confusion and a halt in the American mortar attack. The North Korean forces wasted no time in advancing on A Company, which struggled to mount an effective defense. Fewer than half of its soldiers engaged in the fight, leaving leadership to respond as best they could while many took cover. However, within 15 minutes, B Company began returning fire effectively, even as the enemy continued to press forward. It was found later that many of the American soldiers had weapons that were either incorrectly assembled, dirty, or broken. Additionally, they lacked the means to counter the North Korean tanks, rendering them virtually defenseless. As the North Korean soldiers pressed their advantage, they started to encircle both A and B companies. 30 minutes into the confrontation, the order was given for a controlled retreat, withdrawing one platoon at a time. C Company, initially held in reserve, retreated without engaging the enemy. A company faced intense pressure, attempting a gradual retreat that soon descended into chaos. Men fled, some without their weapons, under constant strafe from North Korean machine guns. The panic spread quickly, driving some men to bypass their rally points and run as far as Pyeongtaek, while others remained in their foxholes, too frightened to move, and eventually were captured. In the aftermath, an officer tried to search for survivors, but was reportedly captured and executed along with 3 others by North Korean forces. Company commanders attempted to reorganize and lead the remaining men southward. The engagement took a heavy toll, with 1/4 of the 1st Battalion killed, missing, or captured soon after the fight. The retreat was marked by a trail of abandoned gear littering the path back to Pyeongtaek. Amidst the disorder, one platoon from A Company was left behind and had to navigate back via a railway for cover, highlighting the chaotic nature of the retreat and the severity of the initial engagement. The battalion ended up regrouping in Pyeongtaek, which turned out to be more of a scramble of soldiers lacking leadership than anything else. Before heading south, the engineers with them took down a bridge north of the town. What was left of Alpha Company made their way to Cheonan, where they joined up with the rest of the 1st and 3rd Battalions, who had also pulled back. They managed to find a few jeeps and trucks to use, but most of their journey was on foot. They encountered some random artillery fire, but the North Korean soldiers didn't chase them down. By noon, the scattered remains of the 34th Infantry managed to escape enemy fire and were no longer in immediate danger. The soldiers, now without most of their gear, didn't try to slow down their pursuers and couldn't get in touch with other units because they had lost their radio equipment. During their retreat, an American aircraft mistakenly attacked their group, injuring a South Korean soldier among them, which only added to the troops' low spirits. By the time evening came around, the 34th Infantry Regiment was setting up a new defensive line south of Cheonan, even though many of its members were left without any equipment to fight with. General Dean, the leader of the division, was really frustrated by how poorly the 34th Infantry Regiment performed in battle. He was particularly upset because they retreated too fast without really trying to slow down the North Koreans. Dean thought about sending the regiment back into the fray immediately, but the risk of ambush held him back. Eventually, he relieved Colonel Lovelace, the commander of the 34th, of his duties and sent the 3rd Battalion back north. However, as soon as they ran into North Korean resistance, they lost their organization and had to pull back. This event at Pyeongtaek took a toll on the morale of the American troops in the area, and this downbeat mood persisted until the Americans could turn the tide with victories at Incheon and within the Pusan perimeter. General Dean took responsibility for this defeat, with historians noting his part in the setback. They point out that it might have been too much to expect a single, inexperienced battalion to stand its ground against a larger, more experienced enemy force. After this, the regiment had to pull together again in Cheonan to face the North Koreans and suffered severe losses before having to retreat following the Battle of Cheonan. The 24th Infantry Division continued to engage in these delaying tactics for another 2 weeks until they were overtaken at the Battle of Daejeon. However, by this time, the setup of the Pusan perimeter had been completed. This strategic position allowed other U.S. divisions to maintain the front line for several more months during the Battle of Pusan perimeter, leading up to the successful Incheon landings. This marked the beginning of the end for the North Korean army in the first phase of the war, showcasing a significant turnaround in the conflict. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.